Thanks so much. I am very sorry I couldn't be there in person. A lot of teaching this week as we wrap up the semester, but I do want to share some updates on research. I'll go ahead and share my screen. So this is a project funded by the Sloan Foundation that we've been working on for the past couple of years and are hoping to wrap up by the end of this year. And the genesis of the project was really that often we understand net zero pathways in terms of these kind of scenarios and roadmaps where we start by looking at each sector and what we can do to get on the path. We're all familiar with this kind of framework. And we've started to map out some of the implications. So, the Princeton Net Zero report back in, I think, 2020, is it now, did some of the spatial mapping of what it would take to get to net zero. And there have been follow-on looks at, land use, resources, that kind of thing. We even now have carbon removal in the mix with this amazing report out of the national labs, Roads to Removal, that took a county level look, not just at, the best techniques out of the techniques that are here, but also some of the employment and environmental justice implications of scaling carbon removal in these regions. So this is all exciting. And what our team was wondering is, can we add to this kind of top-down mapping with a bottom-up mapping of the social feasibility of some of these techniques in different places? So that was basically the driving question of how we started this project. What would a bottom-up mapping entail? How would we do it? And so in this project, we're focusing in 5 different regions. That would be California, specifically the Northern Sierra Forest region, down into the Northern Central Valley, Northern West Virginia, Maine, mainly coastal Maine, but some inland Maine as well, Alaska, particularly the Rail Belt region, and North Central Oklahoma. And so we chose those regions because we wanted a diversity of geographies, both physical geography and cultural geography. And we also wanted a diversity of relevant carbon removal techniques. So with an amazing team, including Travis Young and Molly here at UB, as well as Benjamin Sovacool, Dan Sanchez, Vanessa Suarez has also helped us a lot, particularly in California. We have been doing interviews and other methods that I'll talk about in a minute to better get at some of these questions around how do people experience CDR in context? What other issues are communities facing that are going to intersect with the development of carbon removal? How do people on the ground see the feasibility of these techniques? They may see barriers or opportunities that experts might miss. Also, really, what is a benefit? I think that the carbon removal community is sometimes a bit vague on this point, and we hope there will be benefits, but we need, information from people about what they see as a benefit, and also their experience with previous times benefits have been promised, but maybe not delivered. And we're also looking at vulnerability, specifically when there's been burdens from other sorts of development, and thinking about what can be done to address potential harms from projects. So the methods are a mix of interviews with people that represent different parts of the community, whether that be local government or business or civil society organizations, as well as a survey to get at broader representation, as well as participating at events and site visits, and focus groups with representative members of the public. And so we're doing 2 of those in each place, with and without a visualization intervention. So I'll explain that. I think there's a number of challenges in public engagement. And this goes for decarbonization, but also carbon removal specifically. The changes and the projects can be abstract. People are being asked to deliberate the impacts of something they don't have a real sense of. They might not understand the trade-offs between different options. So if you maybe are not in favor of this approach or technology, you're not necessarily asked, what the the alternatives are. Also, a lot of people feel like they lack agency in shaping these. And this is a complex topic, and people have a lot of other things going on in their lives that are really important. So attention is also a challenge. So we're interested in, how to get at some of that, because right now, a lot of the status quo around engagement, it might be institution-led, so invited participation, um, like a survey or a consultation. I think we've seen a lot of the limitations of that, though, and that it doesn't necessarily lead to two-way engagement. And the institution-led initiatives aren't generally employing modes that address those four challenges I just mentioned. On the other hand, bottom-up or citizen-led engagement on some of these topics, they might not have the expertise always to know about the different trade-offs or some of the technical and infrastructural dimensions of it. So we're interested in using this platform called Twinmotion. We've been trying this out in the focus groups, which is real-time architectural visualization software that's based on a game engine. And that's intuitive enough that you can use it when you're facilitating a focus group without too much training. Also, it's free. And basically, we're having interfaces that represent kind of the town and the landscape, but with different carbon removal and energy infrastructure that you can both drop into a place and also change the attributes of. And we're interested in that sort of platform changes the character of the discussion that we're having. So for example, in Chico, California, we were talking about how well some of this bioenergy stuff fits in with what's already there. In Portland, Maine, we were talking about the potential of having like an ocean CDR port facility that could also be a place to go on field trips and where the community could learn about these techniques. So those kind of conversations opened up by virtue of having a design element that could kind of ground the conversation. So unfortunately, I can't look at my clock and share my screen at the same time. So I might just move pretty quickly through some of this because I know it's tough to listen to a lot of virtual presentations. But I'll talk about the two sites that we did complete the qualitative work. We have 2.5 sites ongoing. And with this project in the Sierra Nevada, we were particularly interested in the idea of forest biomass carbon removal and storage and how that intersected with forest thinning. And so some of the things we heard about were, people are really interested in removing excess biomass for wildfire resilience. But there's a question of how much of that would really intersect with CDR. They were also concerned about the infrastructure for moving this around in these narrow mountain roads. They were really concerned about housing and where the workforce for doing this would live in these mountain communities. And there's a strong preference, I think, for community scale infrastructure, which could be defined in terms of how large a biomass power facility is or in other ways. Some of these similar things came up in Maine. One of the things we looked at were forest products, because you have a lot of old mills like this one pictured on half the page where they're just abandoned basically. But you also have some new projects that are thinking about new products like insulation that could be carbon storing. So there's a big opportunity there. Same thing with the seaweed industry. People are interested in how this could contribute to decarbonization, and a lot of interest from both larger industrial firms as well as artisanal producers. But the big question around both of these is it still going to be a resource or production economy? And also these similar tensions around scale, artisanal scale versus industrial scale, which you need for probably both carbon storage and economics. And questions about the configuration of these new industries, how they work in terms of the financial flows. And again, housing being this underlying pressure for people. So, just to wrap up here, some of the early takeaways. these decarbonization needs are impacting the environment in ways that aren't necessarily coded as being environmental, like housing. But those are things that if we're thinking about deployment, we need to also talk about and engage with people working on those issues. It's also not clear that people want industry to be the basis of their economies. They're interested in, the knowledge economy, healthcare, tourism, internet type stuff, right? So this is a deeper question. And in general, I think we need a new paradigm and new vocabulary for thinking about industry and building and making. So, that might seem like a slippery takeaway for some of you in the room. You might have the question of, okay, but how do I use this type of qualitative research? I think it can help project developers figure out who to talk with in a community and how to talk with them. I think it can also help identify areas that deserve more policy attention, both for researchers and for NGOs. And we can start to understand variation in different regions, and potentially this could help with the national planning that we will need if we really want to get to net zero. So last slide coming soon. Look for outputs from the survey as well as our forthcoming report, 100 conversations on carbon removal. And we'll also have a website that includes some curriculum resources as well.